Hello, welcome back to Railway Mania. Many railway enthusiasts will relate to the daydream of one day owning their own railway locomotive. Today, I'm going to be speaking to someone who made that dream a reality. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Lawrie Rose. Lawrie, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
I ask everybody this question, which is, where did your interest in railways come from?
Do you know what? Everybody asks me this, and I answer the same way. I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. There's nobody in my family that's got any real link to the railways. I think my great-great-great-grandfather was on the parish council in Epping and approved the railway going there. But that's about as close as it gets. My uncle...
That's pretty significant.
Oh, yeah, it was great. I used to volunteer down there. I was like, my great-great-grandfather was part of the people who said we could have a railway here.
Yeah.
My uncle used to be a proper old-school train spotter, stood there with the notepad. I went down to Clapham once and just sat there just watching trains and went around London with him, and he was just running around like a madman getting all the numbers, and I was like, you know what, this isn't really for me, all these units. But he's one of those I kind of talked about, look, I'm volunteering, are you interested in coming along? He went, no, that's not for me, and his interest has waned in later life, whereas mine's got more. The only story I really have for where it's come from is apparently when I was 2, I saw Edward from Thomas the Tank Engine in the post office window and went, I want that. And Mum was like, do you want that really? And apparently I wanted that, and that's where it's all started from. So it wasn't even Thomas. I mean, that's it.
No, that was the same thing. I had Edward, and famously within my family, I accidentally left Edward in Paynton Zoo, and I think I cried for like a whole day after that.
I had a tiny teddy that was known as Little Ted, and this old corgi Arctic truck that had the back of it was open, and there was a great upset when I was very young that Little Ted had gone missing, and would not sleep without Little Ted, was devastated, and it was a really battered teddy when I got hold of it. And after weeks of searching and sleepless nights in the back of the lorry, there was stuff this teddy. This was the best intro I think you've ever done. It's just gone completely off on a tangent away.
Well, actually, I think the tangent is quite important because your interest in lorries as well is quite pivotal to your online presence. So, could you give us a little rundown of what you do online?
How to describe? I film a lot of rubbish. I think that's the easiest way. My official one is I explore vehicular heritage and try and get people involved. I mean, the whole point behind the YouTube channel. We probably should have stressed that at the start. Hi, I'm Lawrie. I do YouTube. The whole point behind the YouTube channel is to try and make so much of our vehicular heritage accessible, to show people that it's something that you can get involved in and you can do, and you don't need any particular set of skills, because I'm quite clearly an idiot and I can do these kind of things. And showing people that you can volunteer at a heritage railway, that you can buy a classic vehicle, and yeah, there's stuff that will go wrong, there's stuff that you won't understand, but the community is out there and it's all very doable. And it's been great because I've had people come up to me going, I've started volunteering because of you, or I've bought this, or I bought a fire engine, which that one hasn't worked out particularly well for the gentleman involved, but possibly not my finest moment. But it's so rewarding when people come up to you and say, yeah, because of what you've said and you've shown me stuff, I got involved in stuff, and that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. To be able to share your enthusiasm with the world, I think, is just brilliant.
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic. And I've had so many wonderful opportunities, and I've gone to so many places and driven and seen so many things. And I generally feed off people's enthusiasm. If somebody's excited for something, I get excited. We went and shot at a windmill. And I previously had absolutely no interest in windmills whatsoever. I see them go, windmills are cool, but no real understanding. And the gentleman who was showing us around was so enthusiastic about this. He was so excited by it. I was equally excited. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I think that passion is infectious.
Oh, yeah.
When someone is genuinely passionate about a subject, and I think this comes across in YouTube videos as well, is that rather than like a rent-a-face like you might get on the TV, it's someone who wants to share their enthusiasm with the world. It really comes across well.
I just like old stuff. I like old vehicles. They just excite me. I have no idea why, because my uncle, like I said, has the vague interest in railways, but the rest of this stuff that I show, the tractors, the old cars, the digger, all of that stuff, literally nobody in my family has any interest in it whatsoever, and they all just look at me in a very strange kind of way.
Oh, Laurie's messing around with his old metal again.
Yeah, pretty much. You ready for a story? This is a tangent and a half before we start.
Me.
So the fire engine came about that I was the best man at a wedding, and we were organising the stag do, and my friend is vegan, and I decided that the nice thing to do would be we'd go to a vegan restaurant, and one of my friends was rather unhappy about the concept of going to a vegan restaurant and was in the process of trying to get KFC delivered to the vegan restaurant. And you go, mate, you can't do... Yeah, but it's all rubbish. And no, I know, but just bear with me. So as a distraction, I think he's the youngest guy in Suffolk to buy a Jag from the dealer, as he works over at the nuclear power station, is on good money.
Oh my God.
And so we were discussing what he could buy, and so the obvious thing went to tanks. And so we're sat there looking at ex-MOD stuff. And on this website, there are fire engines, and the bidding started about $2,000. And I was going, that's a lot of vehicle for not much money. And the idea was planted, and I kept an eye on eBay and such until one came up about 15 minutes away from my ex's house. And I kind of messaged him, went, oh, it's a bit expensive. Would you take X amount? And he went, no, but I do have a Dennis RS that I'd take that for. I had no idea what a Dennis RS was. And so I got one of my friends who was a car mechanic to come with me. The guy couldn't use Facebook Messenger to send a photo, so I had no idea what this thing would look like. I just kind of Googled it and gone, this fire engine is a box. I quite like it. If it has Dennis across the front, I'm having it. And I left the house, and my ex was, don't you dare buy it. So I was, I'm not going to buy it. I'm just going to go and look at it. I'm just interested. And obviously, it turned up the thing was running, and you should never buy a running vehicle, but I fell in love with it and almost launched my mate from the back into the front, and the guy through windscreen trying the brakes for the first time, but that's another story for another time. And went back home, and she just looked at me with this look of, you bought it, didn't you? No, I have not. I said I would not buy it. How dare I've merely agreed to buy it. No money has changed hands. And then, so I had that for several years. This is way before YouTube, when I was still working in the film industry. In fact, I agreed to buy it. And the next day I was heading off on a film, and I was going to be away for 2 months, 3 months. And I said to the guy, look, I won't be home till December. Will you hold it for me? Like, I want it. And he went, yeah, okay. And I spent my first week on film going, someone else might come along and take it. So I went home. I had one day off. We were filming down in London. I had one day off, came up, got the money out, paid the guy, and then went back to the film being like, I own a fire engine now. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I can't drive it. And then it all went wrong, because my original idea was to do proms and weddings and earn some money back with it. And then it turned out to be such an unreliable machine. And that I was doing Ipswich Fire Engine Day, and we had a lovely day. It performed flawlessly all day. We gave loads of rides, took people out. The guy at the end of the day who organised it came up and gave me a bit of cash for fuel and said, thank you so much, you've been wonderful. It's made the day, giving rides. I was like, this has been brilliant. I feel happy with it. Took it home, went to Tesco to put some fuel into it to fill up the cabinet's tank. Paid for it, got back in, and the brakes wouldn't come off. This is strange.
Ooh.
Revved it, and suddenly there's this pop and a bang and the sound of escaping air. And the feeling of dread of having to wander back to the guys and go, hi there, I'm really sorry, but I've broken down on the fuel pump and I can't move. And they went, all right, which one are you? I'm like, yeah, you see the fire engine holding up 2 different pumps? That's me. But at that point, I decided I needed another one, that if I was going to do this business, I'd need a backup, which is when I accidentally...
Because that's the answer, isn't it? When you have an unreliable vehicle to buy another one.
Yes, this is.
Yeah, I recognise that feeling. Yeah,
I'm on 31 at the moment. This logic has not yet worked. So yeah, I put a bid on one on eBay for 500 quid. Having asked several questions about this thing, and about 3 days later, I went back to it. And I wonder what that fire engine went for. 500 quid. Where is it? Redruth in Cornwall. I see. I have made a terrible mistake. So I told my mum, I was like, right, I'm going away for a couple of days. Oh, where are you going? Oh, down to Cornwall. Why on earth are you going to Cornwall? Oh, I bought a vehicle, so I'm going to drive it home. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully... And she looked at me, well, as long as it's not another fire engine. And I just went quiet. And it's the first time I can remember my mum really swearing at me. I like how, so far on the Railway podcast, that we have not discussed railways. This has been a wonderful tangent.
I think it sets the scene. I think we can take it from fire engines to railway engines, because you are involved with quite a few different railways, and you have been over the years. So how did that start?
Good question. I think it all started way back when I was really young, 5 or 6, and my dad took me to the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway. And back then, the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway was a platform with a bit of track, a knackered Hudswell Clark, I think a coach and a wagon. And we used to go semi-regularly, and I used to look up at the locomotive and be like, Daddy, will trains ever run here? No, son. Will that engine ever work again, Daddy? No, son. That will never run again. And we used to go quite regularly, and there wasn't much there. And I think we went for a Halloween thing, and you could just see the red light of the stop board at the end of the line, how short it was. And I think that we were members of that railway, and so I think that was my first kind of taste of. We didn't volunteer, but we were members. I guess ever since I saw this Edward, going to Bressingham was the big excitement of the year. Bearing in mind that I'm old now, so when I was growing up there wasn't really the internet, so for Mum to try and find places to take me was, to go to an information centre and get the brochures and things. But Bressingham was a big one because, of course, as a child, there's 3 railways running plus the standard gauge and all the museum, so that was an amazing thing to go and see. And so when I was old enough, I started volunteering at Bressingham as a junior volunteer. But they tried hard, but there wasn't really somebody there to look after the junior volunteers. So you were given jobs like, can you go paint this fence? Well, a couple of young teenagers, pre-teenagers given paint and stuff. Of course, you made a terrible mess because you didn't know how to paint a fence. And all I wanted to do was learn to be on the footplate. And one day I got a footplate ride on one of the railways, got told off, so got a footplate ride on the other railway. And was told that if I set foot on another steam engine, I would be escorted off site. And that kind of put me off volunteering for the next decade.
Get back to painting the fence.
Yeah, pretty much. It was just, I can, looking back on it, I must have been an amazing pain in the backside. This young child who's not old enough to actually be anywhere near these machines, who keeps getting on these machines.
But it's such a frustrating period of your life when you have the most keenness that you'll ever have, and you can't do it. And I know the reasons that you can't do it, and everybody knows the reasons for safety and everything else like that, but it is so frustrating to be in that position.
It was, and there were a couple of guys...
And no one wants to take you seriously.
No, I was an annoying pain in the backside. I probably still am, but particularly back then, I didn't have any friends because I liked trains, but there were a couple of drivers there who were very nice and kind of took us under their wing, so there were some days set aside that you could join them on the footplate and do something, at least be there. So I really, really appreciate that, but it was the way the management... Again, I totally understand it now, but it put me off volunteering for a while. And eventually, after about a decade, because I needed to be able to drive, I was at a local traction engine rally and chatting to one of the guys who turned out to be the owner. So I started volunteering on that for a year and did a year going around shows until we went to the Wheating show where there was a short length for track and they had a little Barclay running, Little Barford. And I saw it going up and down and chatted to the crew and said, where's this live? And they go, it lives here, but it's normally at the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway. And I went, I remember that. My dad used to tell me, do you run trains? He's like, yeah. So I talked to this gentleman, his name was Wayne, and he's from Wales. Not that that's really relevant, but he's the resident mad Welshman. And the next weekend, or the weekend after, whatever, I went to the Midi and walked around and said, this is amazing, and promptly signed up on the spot. And that was 2017, I think. And yeah, I've been part of the Mid-Suffolk ever since. And since then, Wayne has been blamed for bringing me to the railway. So everything I do wrong, he gets a bit of flack for.
The Mid-Suffolk Light Railway features quite heavily in your YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And so how did you go about tying those two interests together? Because obviously cars and road vehicles are big on there. How did you go about bringing the railway element in? What was it part of the original idea for the channel?
Where's that music that plays as you go into a flashback? Anyway, so as I mentioned, I used to work in film, and in order to succeed in the film industry, you have to live and breathe it, and every single moment of your life needs to be working on film. And unfortunately, I quite like volunteering at railways, so you'd see a job come up and go, I can't do that because I wanted to be at the railway on XYZ. And so I never made it quite as well as I wanted to. And I had it all comes down to making a good or bad decision, because it's not what you know in the film industry, or I suppose in so many other industries, it's who you know. And I fell in with this guy and worked with him on a couple of feature films. He went, right, next spring through to summer, like 4 months, keep your schedule free, we're going to Canada, I'm taking you with me, you're going to be my assistant. Amazing. So, right, sorry guys, I can't do any other work, I'm doing this. And then, of course, it didn't happen. So it's like, end of the year it's going to happen. To get the end of my year clear. And then it didn't happen. Keep next spring, definitely. By which point, you've said no to all of your regular contacts. And in the film industry, you're only as good as your last job. So if I don't turn up and do my role, then they'll get somebody else to do it, and unless they completely royally muck it up, then they'll use them next time. And so I was fairly disillusioned with it all, and I was working on a local job, and I met James Martin, who was pretty much feeling the same way as I was about the whole industry, that it's rubbish, it's unreliable, you get mucked around, the money's, if you make it, the money's good, but at this level the money's not brilliant. And we kind of shared a passion for vehicles, particularly cars, and I've got a general, cars are cool. And he said, yep, I'm packing this all up, I had enough, this is my last job, I'm so annoyed, I'm going to start doing YouTube. And I was like, right, that sounds...
So what year would this have been then?
9 years ago now?
Yeah.
9 or 10 years ago? I've been doing... 9 years.
Yeah, sorry about the realisation.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's a lot of life that's gone on to achieving not much. Yeah, so I talked about the fire engine, and he was buying a Lotus, and we kind of chatted about these things. And I think he did a couple of videos with somebody else, and then we were hanging out. And I asked him if he wanted to come film the video of picking up this fire engine from Cornwall. Look, it's either going to be amazing because it's going to be an epic journey home, or it's going to be amazing when we break down. And we just became really good mates. I thought either way it was going to make a good video. Either an idiot buys a fire engine, drives it home, or an idiot buys a fire engine, gets stranded on the side of some road in... It nearly didn't make it home.
You shock me. Really?
Well, you know it's bad when you tell the guy you're taking it back to Suffolk and he laughs. So we became really good friends during this shoot. This misadventure, which you can see on my channel, by the way. And he said, look, I'm doing YouTube. The guy I've got isn't very good. Do you want to kind of come along and give me a hand? And from that point, I shot basically everything on his channel for the next 3.5, 4 years. And we went from nothing through to, had a couple of breakout videos. And I think he got to about 20,000 subscribers, somewhere around that, where, he's going, people are actually paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, he went off to America and left me alone, which I was very upset about. And admittedly, it's a lot easier to try and get yourself a sofa at somebody's house when you're trying to do it on a budget than go, hey, it's me and my mate, can you put both of us up? But and so while he was gone, he left me in charge to run his channel. And I found that I much enjoyed being in front of the camera, making content that I liked, like looking at the fire engine and old vehicles, and I did a video on a road roller. And when he came back, I was like, look, I want to do more of this. I'm not so interested in being behind the camera, and also a lot of the vehicles that he showed are cars, the modern cars, which I have absolutely no interest in. And then he was trying to do everything, so generally low budget, affordable cars to the high end cars, just everything. And I like the odd weird car, and I obviously like sports cars and things, but doing something on, I don't know, Volkswagen Up or something, I have absolutely zero interest in filming a review. And so we trialled doing some of my stuff on his channel, and some people really enjoyed it, and a lot of people really hated it. And so he went, it's time that you do your own thing and have your own channel. And at the time, I was very upset about this. Looking back on it, when I've tried stuff with my friends on my channel, I completely understand where he was coming from.
He set you free.
Yes, he set me free, and went, you should be doing this kind of content, and with your ties in the railway, you should look at doing locomotive stuff. Oh yeah, that's a really good idea. And it kind of went from there. So I shot a video at Mid Suffolk, just did bits and bobs on the 165, and then did a video at the Great Bush Railway, and it kind of just started snowballing. So I think even after the first couple of videos, I was able to kind of talk to some more people, and they went, yeah, okay. And I went and shot at the Old Kilnlight Railway. And from there, by the time I'd done 5 or 6, people were actually getting in contact and saying, oh, you should come and do this. And I was going, okay, this sounds cool. And it's kind of...
Yes, please. Do you want to come and play with trains?
Yeah, precisely. But that's the worst thing about it. Because whenever I go and review a locomotive, I'm in full work mode with it. I'm constantly thinking about what I need to say, what I need to cover, what I have covered, how I'm going to cut it together in the edit, what I have or have not shot. And just... I don't necessarily enjoy it because you're being critical about it. You're trying to be positive, because we try to be entirely positive on the channel. It's the more you watch stuff, if I don't mention something, it's probably because I don't like it. And so,
apart from steam outline diesel engines.
Oh yes, that video though, that was all set up with, look, I hate this thing. Are you happy with me to do a video just ragging on it? And they went, yeah, we hate it. It's awful. And so that was fine. But the rest of the time you try to be positive, and frequently I don't actually enjoy that driving experience until I sit back, I finish the video, and the video's done, I say, that was really good fun. I enjoyed that. But it's until you've got everything in the bag and it's all together. Well, it's more than having it back. It's everything's okay and it's delivered. And then you look back on it and think that was really good. But at the time, it's really stressful. And so it's made me value my volunteering more, because when I can drive a locomotive and I can just enjoy driving it and being the driver, it's really nice not having to have this running commentary of what you're being critical about it.
I guess that railways and locomotives were intrinsic to your channel then, because they were one of the reasons you got kicked off of James's channel.
Yeah, I think that was just something that I could do, and we both realised that nobody else was really reviewing locomotives, and I think
certainly not in a hands-on way, not in a car review kind of way.
No, I mean the closest thing is of course Chris, who does Slips, and that's a much more in-depth look at it. But actually, physically reviewing it and going, this is what it's like to prep to drive. I think
today, yeah, like on this day, this is what it's like.
I don't think there's anybody else who actually does it. I think I am the only one, and that's in the 2020s. To be doing something unique on YouTube is actually really quite the achievement. And so, yeah, that was obviously to go and do something I was passionate about and share the locomotives. And the rest of it was trying to show interesting vehicles that don't necessarily appear elsewhere, and that might be some people go, oh, I really like that, but I don't have that content elsewhere.
Yeah.
So basically, it's been a lot of really, really bad decisions.
Well, there's a huge variety of machines on the channel. So why did this idea of buying a locomotive come around? Had it been simmering away in the background, or was it an impulse purchase like a certain fire engine or two?
There'd been the idea, I think, forever, for the idea that I'd like to own a locomotive. I just always liked the idea of having it. I remember when I'd been at Bressingham, they had a adopt a locomotive program where you were meant to look after something in the collection, and I'd been really proud about the locomotive that I'd signed up to look after, which I think was Beckton Gasworks number 1. That's now that's been for sale on Preston Services for about the last decade.
Yeah.
And then it was taken away, and somebody else kind of said, "Oh, we're doing this, or we're moving it." But I remember being really excited about that, and I suppose probably since then it's been I'd like to have that. I'd like to say I own one. And so I looked at various things. I went to a scrapyard and looked at a couple of locomotives there and kind of talked about it. Had the railway come along, and the basic idea was that it's too much work. So the idea kind of kept going, but again, I wasn't really sure where to look. And it's one of those things that you don't necessarily go and look. There's, it's not like a car magazine where you go through and look at the classifieds. There are a couple of places, and I just happened to look at traction ads. And in a tiny, tiny advert on the last page of traction ads, when I was working on a film, and this was my downtime, there was an advert for a Ruston 48 DS. And I went, ooh, that'd be nice, because way back in 1952, a Ruston 48 was the sole diesel used on the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway, and it was used for taking up the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway. The only diesel that had ever run on the railway, which is why there's a 165 there, because it was a Ruston. They went, tenuous link, a Ruston took up the line, we'll have a Ruston here. And I went, I really like the idea of bringing a Ruston to the railway, like a Ruston 48. I mean, that said, mine will work 2 wagons up our gradient, which is laid on the original trackbed. So how on earth this thing managed to take up the railway, I will never know. It's because it will do 2. It does 2, and then it just stops.
One chair at a time, one sleeper at a time.
Yeah, a single sleeper and a single chair, and maybe a leg the rail.
Yeah.
So I kept so I contacted these guys. I said, look, I'm interested. And he went, are you actually? I've been mucked around. No, definitely interested. I want this, what I want. Does it run and work? Oh yeah, everything's fine with it. It runs, it drives, no worries. And this was at a railway in Wales, which the name escapes me now. The locomotive was named the Gower Princess, which is now at West Somerset.
Oh, I know that one. Yes, yes.
They've done a lovely job with it. In fact, they've done a better job than I'd have done with it. So I agreed to buy it. I said, look, if it's as you say, and it starts, it runs, it drives, I'll have it. I am working away for the next 2 months, because again, I was working on a film, but, consider it sold. Like, we'll come along and do an inspection on it, and if it is as you say it is, I'll have it. And so I got some dates from the railway, I got some dates with them, we booked in to come and look at it, take in some batteries, because I don't think it had batteries. And a week later, he sent me an email and went, I've sold it elsewhere.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was really gutted, because I'd achieved this, I wanted to have a loco. But the idea of 48 had very much ingrained itself. So I sent a couple of emails to other railways and said, look, I know you've got a 48 kicking around. I don't suppose you're interested in selling it. And I don't think anybody even bothered to respond. And the idea just kept going round that a 48 would be lovely to bring to Mid-Suffolk. And I was also very aware of, if I was going to get a locomotive, it wanted to be something that I could look after. I wasn't interested in forming a group and having other people owning it. Sure, I'd love to have other people helping with it, but I wanted to own a loco. I didn't want to be part of a group who owned a locomotive. There's no shame in that at all, and to everyone who's part of a group who's part of a locomotive, you're doing a great job, guys, much better than me. But I wanted to say, I own this.
Why do you think that is, though?
I think it's possibly just I wanted that satisfaction of being like, this is my loco, rather than going, we own this, to say, no, this is mine. I don't know. Honestly, I really don't know. It's probably a flaw in my personality. But I just really like the idea of having it, and I wanted it something that I could look after that was a manageable size. And the 48 was just perfect, and I had my ties at Mid-Suffolk and thought it'd be lovely to bring it there. So this went on for, a couple of years of wanting one. And then I was working on another film job, and rather than my normal level, I used to work as an assistant director, which is kind of micromanagement, making sure everything's in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And on this job, it was a local job, and I was doing YouTube at the time. It was somebody who got in contact and said, look, we need some local drivers. And the money was pretty good to be a driver. And on the first week, I was going mad because my previous life, I'd been involved in everything, knowing what everything's going on. And then you're a driver, sat there knowing the bare minimum, like where you need to be, who you need to pick up. And some days were amazing, like you're everywhere, you're absolute madman on the road. And then some days it was go and pick. I drove around Dame Diana Rig, which was a massive honour. But some days it was go pick up Diana, take her to the set, and then sit and wait for her to finish.
Well, quite often I found that it's the old saying, hurry up and wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, being on other people's sets, I think for me was an eye-opener, because I was like, oh, hang on a minute. No one's looking to me. No one's looking to me to make a decision. Like, I literally have to sit here, and this is how boring it is for other people when they come to my set.
Yeah, it's awful. And it's particularly, I was really struggling to let go of that control kind of aspect of it. So I read a load of books, wrote a load of novels, and after a week, I was like, I could be doing something better with my time. I know. I've got a list that's 15 years out of date at the time of where all the Ruston 48s are. I'm going to update it. Maybe I'll find one that needs a home. So I just started with the first one and just started emailing people. So I contacted councils over ones that had been scrapped, because obviously the scrapyards are closed, to find out what happened with it. I phoned museums that don't exist anymore, and I tried. Do you know, there's have you ever seen the photos of there's a Ruston 48 in Liverpool, I think, on Atlantic Avenue, and to this day I still don't know who owns it, because the council don't know who owns it. And so I'm pretty sure you can just rock off and take that and nobody will bat an eyelid. But
Railway Mania does not accept responsibility for anybody stealing locomotives from Liverpool. I just want to point that out.
It's really hard though. Like some of these things, you would have thought that the council would say, "We know who owns this thing." But I think they thought it was owned by a developer. The developer had no knowledge of it, and so I went through loads of these things and found that a couple of things on the list were wrong. Some were 88s and not 48s. Several of them have now been scrapped. Some of them have disappeared without a trace. And working through this list, and obviously I sent a email off to Sir William McAlpine at Fawley Hill. Use their contact information. I didn't just email Sir William, but hey, Will, do you have a Ruston? And it's just a fairly basic email of, hello there, I'm trying to update the list of Ruston 48s. I see on the records that you have one. Do you still have it? Does it work? If not, where's it gone? And I got an email back from Sir William McAlpine himself going, oh, dear Lawrence.
Oh my goodness.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm most interested to see an updated version of your list. Yes, I still have number 294266. It would be, it still runs. Blah, 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 blah. Chat. And at the bottom it says, and if you happen to know of anybody who's in the market for a 48, I'm looking to dispose of it. And I'm like, hello. I think I was out with JM. We were out having a meal because we were waiting for something to happen to a car, and this email came through, and I read it, ran around the table. Read it again, ran around. I was like, James, I need you to read this email because I think he's just offering me his loco. And he's like, yeah. Dear Sir William, I must confess the reason I'm trying to update the list is because I really would love a Ruston 48 to bring to the Mid-Suffolk Railway. Blah, blah, blah. Please contact me. Didn't hear anything. And so obviously I misinterpreted this. And then I was driving Toby Jones, yes, that's it, lovely guy. And so he was in my vehicle as I'm driving, and obviously he's the lead on this, and a very respected actor, does a lot of good things. And the phone goes off, and so I'm on hands-free, so hello. I was like, hello, is that Lawrence? Sir William McAlpine here. So, car dumped at the side of the road.
Wait, I just want to know this for sure. Did Sir William McAlpine introduce himself as Sir William McAlpine?
Yes,
Brilliant.
It was
Excellent.
Sir William McAlpine here.
That's surreal.
And so I pulled over the car. Oh, it was amazing. And I was like, this, because he'd always been an idol of mine, like a hero. He saved Scotsman, and such a big mover and shaker in the railway world. And to excuse the expression, so many fingers in different pies. He was everywhere.
Yeah.
And to speak to him was amazing. So pulled the car over at the side of the road because this was far too important to drive and talk. And Toby's in the back going, "What are you doing?" We arranged a date to go and look at the thing, and I remember talking to Toby Jones, and he's, what have you done? I was like, I'm going to go buy myself a locomotive. Why do you want to do that? I really want a loco. So we went down, me and a couple of my friends from the railway, the loco super at the time, and a couple of my friends who are good at restoring old vehicles. In fact, they've got as many old vehicles as I've got, and it's their fault that I have the second fire engine and many other vehicles. So I went, this looks like a great idea, having a collection of vehicles. This couldn't possibly go wrong.
So you invited the people who you knew would convince you to do it?
Oh, I didn't need convinced. I did not need convinced. So we turned up, and the date that Sir William had given us, they were holding a wedding reception on that day.
Right.
So we turned up in the morning, and they had this reception in the afternoon. And the Ruston will not start. So eventually Sir William grabs one of his Land Rovers, and we have that jumps to it to try and give the batteries enough. And eventually this thing thunders back into life, coating us all in wet, sooty water. And Sir William is ecstatic. We're ecstatic. This thing's alive. We're all over the moon, and it's amazing. So, and then we're like, we'll give it a test, and driving up and down with it. So, he's given us the tour beforehand. He's been super. And I don't know what I expected, but I think because of his title, I expected somebody who was a bit more higher class and might look down upon us. But he just
pompous. You kind of because the Sir gives you that idea
because of who he is. Yeah, but he just welcomed us with open arms, just like any other railway enthusiast. And it's my most beloved thing about the whole community is this sense of purpose and belonging that you get when you meet somebody else who's passionate. And he was just as enthusiastic and excited, and the fact that I was interested in this 48 and really liked it, he was obviously really excited about that. And we got it going, we drove it up and down a couple of times, and we're all really excited. It's running, and we're all really, when a group of lads are together, and it's exciting. And then Lady McAlpine, Judy, turned up on one of these motorised golf cart things. So, William, will you stop playing trains? We have guests coming. And so William's like, yes, dear, I'm very sorry, dear. And we were like, we're sorry, Lady McAlpine. We'll put the locomotive away right now, Lady McAlpine.
Duly chastened.
Yes, it was because at that point the guests were turning up. I don't know if you've been to Fawley Hill, but the arrival, it's the yard is level at the top. The rest of it's not level. It's 1 in 13 as it drops down.
Yeah, quite the slope.
It's like you'd get there and you're like, we must be in the wrong place because nobody would build a railway on this hill. And then you turn up and like, oh, they did. Actually, I've driven there once, and it's actually not fun. It's so steep. It's like, this is genuinely...
it's very impressive seeing them go up that bank.
In order to pass as a driver there, they stop the train, and you've got to be able to restart the train, a passenger train, so the wagon, the brake van, without slipping. And if you slip, you fail. That's so as well as your normal ability to be a driver, you need to restart it without slipping in adverse conditions. It's amazing. So we had the guests turning up for this reception, driving around the 48 that's trundling up and down. And so they go, why is there a train running at our wedding reception?
I can't believe they put this on for us.
I know. I just like, so we went, and the loco super kind of wandered up to me and went, right, the price that you said, he said, it's gone up. I went, oh, all right, because I could just about afford what he'd offered me. And so we went and had a chat and said, I hear that the price has changed. He went, well, I've had it revalued, and I think it's actually worth X. And I went, okay, well, I'm really sorry to waste your time, Sir William. It's been a real pleasure, but I can't afford that right now. I really appreciate your time, but I'm so sorry to waste it, but thank you for a lovely day. He went, well, how about we meet in the middle then? I went, Sir William, that's so kind of you. I really appreciate it, and your generosity is amazing. By the time I've got it home and sorted it out and done the things we know needs doing to it, I don't have that much money. I'm really sorry, and I really, really, truly appreciate that offer. That's super kind of you, sir. And he looked at me at what felt like forever.
Looked through you.
Yeah, I've never felt so small. And he went, well, you are a nice lad, and it will be looked after, won't it? In its new forever home. Oh, Sir William, if I had it, it'd be amazing. It'd be so nice to have the type of locomotive that took up the Mid-Suffolk at the Mid-Suffolk. It'd be great to be able to use it to relay our extension and have it there as a part of our history. It'd be such a...
Reversing the errors of the past, maybe.
Yeah, exactly what I said. To undo what one of its sisters did would be an amazing thing. He went, okay then, and put his hand out, and we shook. We walked out of there and got in the car with my friends because we were ready to go home. What happened? So, he wanted this much. And I went, that's a fair price for it. Yeah. Well, then he said he'd meet me halfway at this, and they went, so did you do it? I was like, no, I don't have that much. You idiot! We'd have lent you the money to do it. Yeah, I think I shook his hand at this. What? I don't know. So we went and had a meal, and then they're like, "Do you know what's happened?" So I don't. I think I might have bought an engine, but I'm not really sure. I had to send him an email the next day going, "Dear Sir William, thank you for hoisting it. Just to confirm, how much would you like as your deposit?" And it came back and said, "Oh, you said you don't need to send a deposit. We shook hands." And I went, "No, I'd like to send a deposit. I'd like to have you."
That's old school.
Oh yeah, it was lovely. And so I sent the deposit. We organised it and went back about 3-4 months later and picked it up and brought it back to the Mid-Suffolk.
So that event, 3-4 months later, is that the event that's featured in the video that's on your channel? The
Yes.
JM on Cars came with you?
Yeah, that one.
Yep.
Yes, the you're not allowed to buy any more cars, and I was like, ha ha! And it's one of those things just because the railway knew I was in the market for a locomotive. And the railway knew that I was going to go look at this locomotive. But then, having agreed to buy a locomotive, you then need to go through the procedure of, hello, railway, I would really like to bring a locomotive here.
Well, I think this is really one of the things I wanted to drill down into, because, of course, everyone, almost buying it is the easy bit.
Oh, it is.
And it's almost like buying any sort of old car or old vehicle. You are effectively buying a burden.
Yes.
It's not. That's why old junk is so cheap, relatively speaking, because you're effectively taking on a huge responsibility. There are countless stories littered through preservation history of loco owners that have fallen out with the host railway, or records not being kept properly. There was recently some quite infamous court cases between records not being kept of how much people had used locomotives and versus what the owners said.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an amazing one.
I mean, it's all there online if you want to find it. Maybe we'll do a podcast on it one day. I don't know, but
that's a dangerous line.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's why I haven't travelled on it. What I wanted to ask you was, how did you go about avoiding that? How did you want to protect you and the railway from what could happen in the future?
I think the key point, and it's lots of people come to me frequently asking for advice on where to look for a locomotive, how to buy a locomotive. And the key thing was I'd been at the MIDI at that point for almost a decade, I think. I forget when Sir William actually turned up. But I was a regular volunteer. I went along. I wasn't just on the footplay. I was doing the odd day, doing other things. I was on the events committee. I was doing all the posters, the brochures, all the design work for them. And so I was very much a part of the furniture. I was an old volunteer despite being one of the younger people there. And so I had a really good relation. I still have a really good relationship with the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway, and I'm one of those people who's been there a long time that everybody knows who you are, and I'm not necessarily sure who those people are. So, hey, you, it's really good to see you. But that's the most important thing, is to actually have a relationship with the railway and understand how that railway operates, how the foibles of that particular place, how they function and what their kind of values are. Because it's very different to say, hey, look, I've got a locomotive, I'd like to bring it to you, without knowing that group at all. And I've talked to people, I might take it to so-and-so, and do you have any ties there? No. It's probably not your best.
You're going to struggle, yeah.
Yeah, it just makes everything a lot easier, because it makes some stuff more difficult, because obviously you're dealing with friends at this point, and particularly the MIDI, like a lot of these smaller societies, like a big family really. There's disagreements, people fall out, but at the end of the day you all care for each other, and they're all people that I go to the pub and have a drink with. So when things go wrong, it does make it harder, because it's like a friend telling you off rather than the railway. But it does mean that a lot of the time things get discussed a lot more openly with, hey, there's a problem with this, or this is happening. And it's been fairly relaxed, to be honest, and the general consensus was if you break it, you fix it, and feel free to use it.
Have the MIDI ever had their fingers burnt before with loco owners? You don't have to name any specific examples, but I wonder if they're quite a new society compared to, like, say, I don't know, the Bluebell.
We had one. I won't say which engine it was or anything, but you'll probably be able to work it out if you know which engines have been at Mid-Suffolk. Our locomotive superintendent changed, and he went to this owner and went, right, I need to see the boiler certificate, please. And they went, yeah, no, it's got a ticket, it's fine. Yes, but I need to see the paperwork, please. The insurance needs to see it to sign off. Oh, well, it's got a ticket. You don't need to see the paperwork. No, you don't understand. I really need to see the paperwork. And this went back and forth until eventually we got a different engine that had got a paper boiler certificate with it.
Just confirm, it was a certificate that was paper, not the boiler.
Oh, looking at what it is now, it may well be about the thickness of paper, yes. So that was, I think, one of the worst. That's the worst case we had. But to be honest, the society only has one other resident privately owned locomotive, which is the Fowler, the shredded wheat Fowler.
Yeah.
I guess this is why I wanted my own, because as the railway, I already owned, because I'm a life member there, I already owned kind of part of 1604, the steam engine there, and the Ruston is railway owned as well. So I already owned part by default of the 165 and of 1604. So having a private engine there is actually, obviously we have a hard in steam engines, but having a resident diesel, mine was the first resident locomotive that was actually 100% based there. So it was kind of new ground for both of us, I guess.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been a member of that railway and well known to the railway,
yeah.
I think is the simple answer. Yeah, it just makes you more aware of what's going on. Because several people I've spoken to as well are not currently volunteers. And I know it sounds very elitist to say it, but you really need to volunteer before you buy a locomotive, preferably at the place it's going. But at least if you volunteer, you've got a vague idea of what's going on, like how a railway operates.
And the people that you're going to be dealing with.
Oh, exactly. Like to know who's going to be around, who's going to be operating it. I have with mine that I can say, look, I'm not happy with this driver. I want him to be retrained. Because I'm not happy with the way he's treating my machine. But to be able to have that kind of flexibility is hugely important to make sure you're happy with how people look after your locomotive. Because at the end of the day, I mean, a Ruston 48, like, there are two kinds of people. There are people who think that the Ruston 48 is the best kind of locomotive ever devised, and those who are wrong. And I'm not biased at all.
No, of course not.
As the owner of a 48, I can tell you that they're entirely useless.
Right.
Because it's 7.5 tons. I mean, it is a completely... Actually, no, I tell a lie. The 88, I would say, is useless. The 48 itself is brilliant because there's no air brakes or anything. It's just a handbrake.
Let's paint a picture for the listener. Imagine, I would say, a wagon with a tractor bolted to it.
It's not far off.
Would that be?
It's pretty much.
In the ballpark?
It's the weirdest thing to drive because it's so short. It's such a strange. I mean, it's I think 13 foot long. It is tiny.
It is very
They're
small.
2'6" drivers, I think. If you're at a society where you need to move wagon X from A to B, and that's all you need to do for them, the 48 is perfect because it turns on, fires up, and you go straight away. There's no waiting for air. There's nothing. It just so the one I almost bought that's now at the West Somerset, they use it as the work shunter because you just turn it on, drag something in and out, turn it off, it's done. For that, it's perfect. The 88, the next size up, it still has that. Then has air brakes, so you need to turn it on, charge the air. And if you've got an 88, well, why don't you have, say, an 08 or an 03 or a Ruston 165? 88 sit in this very much useless category, whereas the 48 has a niche market, but it is effectively useless because it is so tiny.
And how much does it weigh?
7.5 tons.
Okay, so in terms of being able to transport it around, it's a little bit easier than your average.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Locomotive.
When we've moved it previously, we just picked it up with a high hab, changed around it, and just whoop, on the back. Jobs are good. Before
we move into sort of logistical things, I just want to recap with the railway that you hosted on. Is there any paper agreements that you had to agree with them that go down in writing?
Yes, there is. Everything is in a contract between me and the railway, and but it's, because of the way that a railway works, everything has to be written down, agreed formally. Because it's not mates at the end of the day, it is an agreement between me, a locomotive owner, and a society, and so there needs to be something there, particularly when something goes wrong, to say, well, actually, you're responsible for this, or I'm responsible, or X, Y, Z with it. So yes, there is a formal contract that exists, because you've got to, at the end of it, it's to protect you and it's to protect the railway.
Yeah, going back to the thing I said earlier, so much bad blood arises from poor record keeping, for example. So just thinking about ways to avoid that.
Don't buy a locomotive. That's the way to avoid that.
Buy a locomotive in the first place.
Just don't do it.
Let's go on to your journey with this engine. It's a tiny thing. How did you go about getting it back? Because how do you factor that into the cost of purchase, the money that you'd saved up to buy the loco in the first place?
Yeah, it was. I had my budget of what it was going to be roughly, which it turned out to be slightly more. But we used a firm that we use regularly at Mid Suffolk, who have high habs, and we use them for. We have several wooden-bodied carriages, which are now on modern metal underframes, and so for just doing those jobs, it's much better to get a contractor in who has the insurance. If anything goes wrong, it will be sorted, and the experience to safely lift these things. Yeah. And so when I was looking for it, the loco super went, well, why don't we just use these guys? We have a good working relationship with them. We know what they do. It's better because I've been looking at cheaper ways of doing it, like hiring a lorry myself, but winching it onto the back, and we just went, just safely and peace of mind, just pick it up, put it on, job's done.
Yeah, sometimes you just want to pay a guy.
Yeah, oh yes, and for something like looking back on it, very glad we did, because they did a lovely job, and it was super, and not having the stress of it, particularly when the guy was like, I have never moved a loco before. Although it's not as bad as when
did he say that after it was already on the lorry?
Oh yeah, when it was loaded up, it's like, I've never done this before. But it's not when I moved it. When it went to the Leiston Works Railway in Suffolk to open up this tiny works railway, first diesel ever to run the railway. They originally were getting an Andrew Barclay, and that had failed a month before with firebox issues. So they were planning to use the same lorry. So this 4-axle low loader turned up that they're going to winch it onto. And they couldn't get this vehicle into the site. They couldn't get the trailer to swing round into the loading ramp at Mid Suffolk. I was like, look, two things. Firstly, you should probably come and see it first, because it's like putting a Tonka toy on the back of this lorry. And secondly, if you can't get it in here, there's no way you're going to get it down to the railway at Leiston. And so
yes, which literally runs in an alleyway.
Yes, it is, and this was
between houses.
It's so close to that, which is amazing. It's one of those things that when that railway, because they keep talking about hopefully reopening it and doing public rides, I'm not sure how the locals going to feel. Like the once off of the diesel going up and down, everyone's like, "Oh, this is great, hi!" If it's a regular occurrence, they may not enjoy it as the house vibrates. So eventually, they sent this 3-axle heavy recovery vehicle with a tilting bed and just winched it onto the tilting bed. And the guys again were like, "We've never moved a loco." So this is really, really reassuring. Thanks, lads. But yeah, in all, it was a good experience. And again, because it's a light, you can kind of get away with these things. Whereas if you've got a bigger engine, like if you've got an A4 with a special rear truck, you've got real problems with if you just want to do magic stuff like this. In fact, if you've got an A4, you've probably got big problems full stop, haven't you? Because that burns a big hole in your pocket.
You've probably got a bigger budget, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that is... I've got a friend who owns the Polish 080 at the Nîmes Valley Railway, and that had a horrendously expensive overhaul, but at least that locomotive now generates money to go towards its upkeep to pay the owner back and hopefully to help fund its next overhaul. The 48 doesn't. And I mean, obviously the initial outlay is a lot less, but it's not a money-making venture, this. I bought a locomotive because
But presumably you knew this when you bought it. You knew that this type of loco was not for hauling, say, passenger trains or other things like that.
Oh, yeah. I knew what it was. And again, it's part of being part of the railway first. You know exactly what it is. And you know what you're expecting it to do. Although I do keep asking if we can do brake van rides with it, because I think that'd be great. But it's understanding that relationship with that locomotive isn't going to generate you money, and the reason I wanted that locomotive is because I thought it was going to be fun, I thought it was going to be something special to own, I thought it was going to be a good fit for the railway. And to be fair, it has been an exceptionally useful thing at the railway. And the big thing as well that people possibly don't realise, is that just because you own a locomotive, that doesn't necessarily mean you get to drive your locomotive. It doesn't automatically allow you to be passed out. It doesn't automatically mean you can rock up and drive your loco. And it doesn't mean that you can go, "Oh, I want to take it for a spin."
I was speaking to a fellow volunteer of mine who was helping train a nascent preservation operation recently. And there was one person there who had bought a steam locomotive and were almost learning everything in reverse. They'd started at driver, and the ongoing joke was that, well, one day you'll make it all the way to cleaner. because you started out at the top, and it's very, very different for that because you haven't learnt on the way up.
Oh, I can understand. It would be it's difficult, and as I'm a driver at 3-4 4 railways now. I honestly lose track. And every time I go to another railway, when you start at the bottom again, it becomes, you're itching. Obviously you don't expect to walk in and to be given the shovel or the regulator, but every time you start at a new place and you're like, no, just go on, just let me have a go. Let me show you that I know what I'm talking about.
Let me touch the handle.
Let me touch the noise.
I want
handle.
to touch the handle.
I mean, it's one of those things, again, you learn through volunteering, that when you're a fireman or a cleaner and you want to show that you're ready to be assessed, that you know what you're doing, and you start doing stuff to show that you're assessed, it is being on the other end of it as being a driver or a fireman, and your cleaner/fireman starts doing stuff. There is nothing more annoying. So, I had one fireman at the East Anglian Railway Museum, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I drew the line on the floor with chalk.
You didn't.
I did. He's just one of these lads that you'd be sat there, and you'd hear the vacuum go on, and he's like, "That's my control. You don't. That's my control. I'll decide when I want to put." "Oh, I was just trying to help you." "No, I understand that. You don't touch that. That's mine, thank you." And just you get on the footplate, and he's standing your side at the controls as a kind of, "Oh, I'm here. Can out of the way." And so it got to that stage that he was well known for doing it, but I just turned out and was like, "Here's chalk. This is my side. If you want my injector on, let me know and I'll turn it on." And it's a terrible thing to say, but it's really difficult. I really understand, because I've been.
But you always think that that's what's holding them back.
That wasn't what was holding him back.
I was trying to give him an excuse to say maybe if he eased off the keenness a bit, maybe.
It sounds really terrible.
I'm not sure.
It's really difficult though, and speaking as a driver, like having people that are ready to be passed out. There's a big difference between. As a cleaner to fireman, I was sat there biting at the bit. I wanted to be a fireman. I knew I was ready for a fireman. When I got my firing exam, I was overjoyed and passed it, and it was wonderful. But being a driver, I was quite content being a fireman. And then suddenly it's like, "Oh, Lawrie, you're going to be assessed as driver." And I'm like, "Oh, am I really? Oh, okay, that's good." And I was excited to be a driver, but it was. I understand that kind of, you want to do it, you want to prove yourself, and you want to do it yourself rather than have somebody else watching over you.
Yeah.
So I do really get it. But again, from being the other side of it, as being an instructor, teaching people, you can see when people aren't quite ready. As many of your listeners will know, driving a steam engine is really easy. Driving a steam engine well is slightly more difficult, but knowing what to do when things go wrong and how to make sure that you're looking after your crew, the passengers, and your locomotive, and understanding what noises it should make and when something's not quite right and how to deal with that. That's the thing that takes time. Lots of people kind of go, "Well, I can drive this, so I am ready to be a driver." And you go, "Well, unfortunately..."
Well, that's why driving courses work, because you're able to put a member of the public on the regulator. Yeah.
Well, which reminds me of when with doing driver experiences, you generally know, within the first minute to 5 minutes if you're going to have a really good day or if it's going to be a hard day, just from talking to people. And sometimes you get, because anybody can learn to drive a steam engine, but you find that kind of generally speaking, people are either mechanically minded and have the knack for it, or they don't. And some people, by the end of the day, you're like, "Yep, you know what you're doing, right? You've got a green flag, so how are you going to do this? Yep, good. And some people, at the end of the day, it's like, "Right, so this one is called the regulator. Remember that?
Yeah.
So we need to take the brake off first. That's that one over there." And I had one driver experience, and we're going along. So remember, we're going to just go at walking pace. Yep, walking pace. We're going quite fast. This is more than a walking pace. So can you just grab the brake? Yeah, that's the brake over there. The gold one. Can you pull the gold handle, please? All the way of the gold one. All the way of the brake. The brake. Can you now pull the brake, please? The brake. Now, brake. And the guy's just sat there going, like, "This is great." But he was quite a large gentleman. I'm like trying to get past him to apply the brake.
That's tactical. I think it's something I always have in my mind when I'm learning, because I'm still way down the list.
You never stop learning.
You never stop learning. And I think having that open mind and saying, I'm not the Billy Big Man, I've got to come in and show everyone how it's done. Because I think that, we did a few drive experiences at my local preserve museum, really. It's an exhibition line. On the quayside, fenced off. Again, you just do walking pace up and down the quayside, light engine. And the person who said that they'd had previous experience and stuff like that. I mean, you're talking about at Fawley Hill, people being able to restart a passenger train on a gradient of 1 in 13. I mean, it's an amazing skill to be able to wheel spin a light engine as much as they did on flat track. On, off. And it's like, I never want to be that person. I always want to say, I need to learn. there's always more stuff to learn.
It's really important to do. I consider myself a good fireman and a good driver, but when I was chatting to a member from a larger railway who we've at Mid-Suffolk got good ties with, and some of our guys go there, and he said it's my favourite thing when we get one of your guys who turns up going, I'm a fireman, I know what I'm doing, and then you give them the shovel on a 9F and they just go,
yeah.
Oh, because the thing that I have learned, particularly doing this job and going to different railways, is the standards and the idea and the ideology behind railways varies massively. The standards of what people think and and just generally how you look after a locomotive varies hugely. And it's important to kind of realise that just because somebody has a standard at one place doesn't necessarily mean that standard suits another place. It's really variable. I try very hard not, because obviously I've driven a lot of stuff now. I've driven stuff all over, wider than the UK. So I try not to kind of go, well, I know what I'm doing because I've driven X, Y, Z. However, we recently in Mid-Suffolk have had Marcia from the Kent and East Sussex. And when it turned up to cover our Christmas turns, and they went, it's not very big, so we're going to top and tail with the diesel. And I went, that's rubbish. Marcia will do the train. Why are we doing this? This is stupid. The diesel makes too much noise. It ruins it. It's rubbish day. And so I had my turn came up to drive the Marcia. Rubbish day, blah, blah, blah. And it was that cold snap we had just before Christmas.
Yeah.
And I have been at that railway now for, I think, 15 years. And coming up to 15 years, something like that. And I have never not known the 165 to start. And the 165 would not start, and I'm sitting there going, oh, I'm going to get to solo this.
Solo.
This is brilliant. I'm really excited. And then that fear started to creep in of, I've talked a really big game that this engine's going to be able to do it. And everybody else has said it's not going to be able to do it. And somebody apparently tried it and went, oh, yeah, no, it's not, it's too light on its feet. And I'm sat there going, oh, this is either going to be a great moment for me or I'm going to be the YouTuber who can't drive a locomotive. And funny enough, it did manage to get up and I felt very justified with it. But I think that's
good.
That's about the closest I've got to kind of... I try not
embarrassing.
Yeah, well, it would have been hugely embarrassing. And you get a feel for these things. Yeah, you'll probably do it. But suddenly being asked to prove it was a little bit... And there's lots of nice foibles with the whole volunteering and knowing stuff and being a younger volunteer. I was a young volunteer once, and knowing these things. I remember early when I was a driver in my first or second year, I was on the footplate and my fireman was retired and so was our cleaner. And so a gentleman comes up and with his family and says to the cleaner, who was the oldest, oh, are you the driver? He's like, no, I'm the cleaner. So turns to the fireman, oh, you the driver? No, I'm the fireman. And I'm sat there going, hi, it's me. I'm the youngest here by about 40 years. It's a beautiful thing about being a young volunteer because people don't necessarily assume that the young gentleman on the footplate is the one who's got the experience for it.
That's brilliant.
Oh, it was lovely. It was good times.
Well, I want to talk now about engine handling and things like that because that segues quite nicely into this. How do you feel about other people driving your engine, and what have you noticed that your reaction has been to that?
It depends who's driving it. It's horrible if you see it being driven badly. With the 48, it has a 3-speed epicyclic gearbox, so each one has its own clutch, and you are meant to gently drop it into gear and not ride those clutches. And you can see sometimes they're going, please stop riding that. Just put it into gear. Just let it be engaged because you're wearing out my gear. Most of the time, though, it's just great joy. I would turn up at the railway occasionally on one of our works days, and you just see it pottering around the yard, and it's the most wonderful feeling of, that's mine. And you sit there looking at it going, that's mine. That's my engine working. And it's just glorious. It's absolutely magnificent watching the thing trundle about, and to know that it was being used and that it was useful. It was wonderful. I love it. I love it. Sometimes you see it going, I don't recall there being an email for a roster for this because I would have rostered myself to do this, but it's just nice turning up and seeing the thing being used because it's such a delight. It's very agricultural how it sounds, and watching it, I've got a photo somewhere of the 165 and the 48 just parked up around the Gold Stage, and I love it. It would never have happened at the Mid-Suffolk days, but it looks brilliantly like railway, and it's
bucolic.
It just looks right. Yeah, it is. It absolutely, and there's pride in it. It's your thing. It's your little baby. And watching it trundle around and do what it's meant to do is, I guess it's why I like all of this old stuff. It's why I like steam engines. Is because by all logic and all common sense, that thing should have been scrapped. That should have been cut up and turned into baked bean cans a long time ago, because the job it was designed for doesn't exist anymore. It is useless now. And particularly steam engines that have been literally scrapped and sent to a scrapyard, and some absolutely mad bunch of people went, we should save that. Why? Well, we quite like the idea of saving that, but it's obsolete, it's smoky, it's inefficient, it'll cost a lot to repair. Yeah, but they're kind of fun, aren't they? And I love that mentality that all these things, and so many of my vehicles and so many things at Heritage Railways should not survive. And that's what's glorious about them. They shouldn't still be here. They should have been gone. Like my diesel, it is useless. It does. I think we can do 9 miles an hour with it. I can't exceed the speed limit in Mid-Suffolk on it.
That's good.
Oh yeah, you can go flat.
9 miles an hour is plenty.
It's scary because it's so short. But everything there should have been gone. The wooden carriages, the bodies, they should have been chucked away. All the locomotives, definitely long gone. Same for every Heritage Railway you go to. They shouldn't still be here. And the fact they're amazing, impossible survivors. And that is glorious. And that's how I feel about the 48, especially when I see it working and earning its keep. It's like, this shouldn't still be doing this, and I shouldn't be able to see this doing this, and I shouldn't be part of it. But I am, and that is wonderful. So, I mean, on that on a slight tangent, to all of the people who have been involved in Heritage, and particularly those founding members, thank you for your absolute insanity, because you guys are amazing, and the legacy you leave behind is incredible. I don't know if any of you listen to this.
I mean, it is a bug. Yeah, it's a bug. It's a sickness.
Oh, it is. It is, and it gets worse the more you get involved in it. And I think that's true for any kind of aspect of heritage. You get involved in any of these communities, whether it's windmills, cars, tractors, railways. Once you get into it, particularly when you start getting involved in the community, it gets become very addictive. Like chatting to you, like-minded people, and enjoying that sense of camaraderie is very special. And it's nice being around like-minded people who enjoy the same kind of stuff that you like, and being enthusiastic about it. It's addictive, and that's why I now have a serious problem.
Yeah, Ruston DSs. I mean, especially the 48s. They made quite a few of them, and as you say, I mean, if they're readily available, they almost become, I guess, a bit like Mark Ones in that they are almost seen as a consumable by a lot of railways. So a lot have been scrapped in preservation.
Yeah,
I think to actually take pride in such a sort of niche vehicle, I think is great.
It's exactly what I wanted. It's small, but it's big enough to be useful. And I'd love to own a steam locomotive, but I have nowhere near the money nor the resources, or I'm that really annoying person that I know what's wrong with that locomotive. I know what's wrong with that steam engine. I can't fix it, but I can tell you what's wrong with it. And that's my failing. If I had my time again, I'd go and I'd volunteer more in the workshop and learn how to use tools, how to fix things, because I'm not a machinist. I don't understand how to use these things, how to fix things. I wish I did, but I don't. I can weld, by which I mean I can attach 2 pieces of metal. That it's not good. And again, for somebody who's thinking about owning a locomotive, particularly have some experience with that kind of stuff, so at least you know what needs to be done, even if you can't do it yourself. And do you know, when I bought it, I think I made the argument for it, and people were like, it's a useless loco. But in the years since, they've actually become a bit more desirable. You've seen more of them being bought up and restored because of that. Turn it on, shunt what you need to do. They are the perfect work shunter. I mean, mine was used after it finished at the Burnside tramway. It went off to Steamtown at Carnforth, and it was used there as their work shunter for a bit, shunting Scotsburn, Sir Nigel Gresley, Dennis Castle when they were there. And then apparently one day they were shunting a Black 5 with it in heavy rain. I went, right, stop. And they put the brakes on, it didn't. And at that point it got shunted to the back of a shed, to the siding, and they just went, yep, we're not using that anymore because it doesn't stop things.
Yes.
But
Funny that.
For most places, and particularly the smaller places who don't have the 08 or the 03 or the bigger locomotive, or don't want the hassle of having to start that for a small movement, they're just super little things. They're as basic as they come. And it's been quite good fun getting to know a couple of the other owners. I shout out to my friend Jay, who's got the one at the Chasewater Railway, and he is doing the finest restoration. It is. Last time I saw him, he'd got the engine out of it, And I said, "Oh, shall I take the head off and inspect things?" I'm like, "You might as well at this point, mate, and go and have a good look at it." And when he's finished it, it's going to be the best 48 in preservation. It's going to be so much better than mine.
New.
Oh yeah, he's doing a proper nut and bolt restoration on it, and it is going to, he didn't have third gear when he got it, so he's taken apart that epicyclic gearbox, which works on some kind of magic that I do not understand, and he's rebuilt it and is fairly confident that it now works. And so I said, "Oh, great, if I ever have a problem with mine, you can come sort it out, can't you?" He just went, "No, I'm never doing it again."
Nah, he's made a run for his own back there.
But
he's got the knowledge now.
It's finding other people who've got it is great, because you can kind of chat the same about, and kind of understand the importance of it. Because I think there's, in preservation, particularly at some lines, the big railways that need it, there's this big emphasis on the big engines, the namers. And of course, that's a huge important part of our combined history. That's part of the story of this country. But it's really important to remember the small, useless locomotives, which were the forklift of their day. They were the things that ran industry. The 48 was perfect for a company that had a wagon that arrived on a Thursday, needed to be shunted somewhere, and then on a Friday they'd take it back, and for the rest of the week it sat there. Or running a tramway. There's a beautiful story about mine on the tramway, that there was a big plaque in the cab which said however many wagons that it was allowed to take, and it wasn't allowed to take anymore, which apparently nobody could read, because apparently it was never paid attention to. The gentleman got in contact with me who used to ride behind it to work. He had a cottage and worked at the paper mill, so it would go past in the morning, he'd hop on one of the wagons and just... But he said they would frequently load too much for it, and what would happen was the locomotive would just spin its wheels. So the driver would just open the throttle, lock it in top gear, hop off, and just grab whatever he could find at the line side and throw it onto the tramway. And eventually, it would just crunch itself into momentum and trundle along.
Oh god! And that's plant, isn't it? That is just plant equipment.
Exactly, and that's what it was. It was plant. That was what it was used for. And mine's strange, because a normal 48's got an old car style of bonnet. They are hinged in the middles and they lift up. There's a photo of mine, and they've been cut off. So, as it was on a tramway, I can only assume they rattled too much and they scared other things, so they just cut them off. I guess you can understand, but there's 2 photos I know of my 48 in service, and kind of seeing those photos of a machine that you own, seeing it in its active life is just outstanding. And I sit it and I look at it and go, "That's mine. I've got that. I've saved it."
It's a very odd sensation. I can imagine.
It's fantastic, and I would be really excited regardless with the 48 and seeing its history. But the fact that Sir William had it just makes it so special, and the fact that I got to meet Sir William and become friendly with Sir William, and I'm still very friendly with Judy. She sends me Christmas cards, and she came after Sir William died, because the original plan was that he was going to come and rename it once it was repainted, and she came up and it was known, it had been called Sir William at Steamtown, I think, when he took ownership of it anyway. And so I had it rededicated to Sir William McAlpine, and she came along and did that with me, and that was glorious to have her come along.
It's a beautiful moment as well.
It was. I struggled not
especially
to cry.
Considering the story of how you acquired it, and the deal that you made together, and that he saw that you were really enthusiastic about it and everything. It was
the last thing I believe that he sold before he passed.
Wow.
And I got invited to not to the funeral itself, but to the wake. It's so many people that, and the stories that were told of Sir William, the things that he'd done, and the dubious way he'd gone about stuff, and the stories were amazing. And hearing gentlemen from the Welsh Highland talking about how they managed to get the deeds to, because McAlpine still owned part of the track bed because the Welsh Highland had no money, and the stories of how they'd managed to actually trick the office staff into being able to talk to Mr. Bill, and he came and kind of looked at the project and saw it, and they were looking at one particular bridge that was falling down. They went, "Oh, look at that, typical McAlpine engineering, it's falling down," and he turned to them and went, "Well, when you've finished paying for it, we'll build it properly." All these stories and things that he got up to, and the way he'd kind of wine and dine people to get what he wanted, they all told the story of the sane man, and amazingly the man I got to meet, not this kind of imagined mythical figure that I didn't see. It was the man that I met, and it made it so special the time I got to spend with him, because that was Sir William. He was a true enthusiast who was excited about these things and enthusiastic about these things, and it was glorious. And the other thing, I was sat down listening to these stories. I looked to my left and was like, nudged my mate Nigel. I was like, that guy looks a lot like Bill Bailey. Pulled up my phone and I was like, it's Bill Bailey. I'm sat next door to Bill Bailey. Great day. It was, yeah, he was an amazing man, and it's an honour to hub the machine that he had and to be able to kind of keep a bit of his legacy alive with it. Because I think isn't there an 8F that's named after him and something else on the main line that's named after him now? Mine was first.
Undoubtedly.
Mine was done first.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
But
You mentioned repainting just then, but other than paint, what else have you had to do to it since you got it? Because you said to start with, it didn't start when you first went to inspect it.
Yeah, well, when you say it didn't start, I think it was just from lack of use. It's an old diesel. The engine's had a service. It's had a repaint and some.
But you say that, I mean, that's such a throwaway comment. The engine's had a service. What's involved in that? Because, I mean, a lot of us would have serviced cars before. Is it exactly the same kind of treatment? Just new oil?
Yeah, pretty much. That's what we did to it.
Great.
New
filters.
We gave it some new filters and we changed the oil. And we looked at the receipts and the paperwork that came with it. And there's a folder like 6 inches thick of information that came with this thing. And the amount of money that Sir William spent on it, it had a full engine rebuild, like complete strip down in his ownership. The cab's new. It was stupid. So we were like, well, it's basically mint underneath. So we changed the oil in it, and it was painted red, and red fades unpleasantly. I think in his ownership it was red. It had a bell on, a la Canadian Railways, and the bell had disappeared. So we filled the holes and painted it into a shade of green, which was like, it's probably Rustonish. As it is, it's a bit too dark. But that was it. That was kind of enough to bring it back into service for a while.
How long has it been in use for? Is it still in use at the railway?
Not currently. It's been out of use since before COVID. So when it went to Leiston Works, it came back and they did the fitness to run with a new Loco Super, who went, ooh, the tyres are a bit thin on this.
Right.
Ooh, the flanges are pretty dodgy. And it was from then it was put into restricted use of first gear only. And then before COVID, they decided they weren't happy with it, that it could potentially split points. So it was then stopped, and then COVID happened, so nothing happened. And yes, that's basically where it sits now. Is
on the 48DS, are they solid wheels all the way through, or do they have tyres pressed onto them?
Mine are solid, but it has a wear mark of where you're meant to then get a tyre fitted, so you're meant to turn the wheel flat and fit a tyre.
Right.
My set has never had a tyre fitted to it, so I've got the wear marks. But the problem is that for a small little locomotive, the best quote I got was Statford Engineering, and that was $10,500 to turn them and fit the tyres, which for the amount of work...
That's walk your around money, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I've got a locomotive, I can just throw that at it.
Yeah.
And again, if you've got a steam locomotive or something, or a big diesel, he's earning money to help cover this, you can kind of go, okay, that's fair enough. And if I get tyres fitted to this wheel set, I will never need to get them turned again. It's never going to do enough work. I'll never need to get them replaced. I might not even need to get them turned because it won't do enough to actually wear them. But £10,500 is an awful lot of money to find on a toy. So that's basically, it's been exploring the options, and as of the time of this podcast, there is a plan. Whether the plan comes together remains to be seen, but there is a plan, and hopefully, if you keep an eye on the channel, about a month after when we're recording this, there should be a big update explaining what I've been working on for the last 11 months. It will be 11 months of this particular plan coming together to make it happen, and I will be asking for help from the community to make it happen because it's still horrendously expensive and probably a bad idea. But keep following us at LMM for my latest mistake, because it's one of those things. What I'm doing, it is wholeheartedly a terrible mistake, but I'm going to do it because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment.
I think your audience enjoys it when you make mistakes, though.
Oh yeah, I think it's one of the things, but that's the whole point. There's the whole social media thing. I have these kind of discussions with my dad. He is very against social media. And I come back and say, social media is like a hammer. If you use it correctly, it's really good at knocking nails into a wall. If you start smacking your head with it, you're going to do yourself some damage. And I feel very strongly the same with social media. If you use it in the wrong way, it's really damaging to your own mental health and to how you perceive the world. If you use it how it's meant to be used, it's a really useful tool. A lot of social media, a lot of people on social media, they present that carefully curated life. And I mean, so do I. I present a lot better. Like, people see my collection of vehicles and think that I'm loaded to have all this stuff, which couldn't be further from the truth. But
No. If you didn't have a collection of old vehicles,
might be a lot
you would
better off,
be.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the funny side of it. Like, my collection has cost me surprisingly. There's a couple of vehicles that have yet to be revealed, but I've been given them because people have seen them and gone, oh well, it'd be a good home for them. And I went,
well, I mean, there's a brilliant video that you did. I think you got a dumper truck for 25 quid.
That's my best
and
purchase.
took it home in the back of a Sprinter, was it?
It was where I was working. And I just fitted it in the back of the Transit. It was
a Transit.
It was a Transit,
okay.
a long wheelbase Transit that we picked it up and dumped it in, and got back. And my boss was like,
"Dump the dumper.
What have you done?" So I need to borrow the van this evening. Why? Well, I need to move something. What is it? And I was like, "Oh, it's a dump truck." Okay, how are you going to get it in the van? Well, it's already in the van. Hence why I need to take the van home, and I need to borrow some ramps to offload it. So obviously what I show is created to be the best possible content and to be the most entertaining and to represent me in the best way, because I don't want to be shown to be a complete and utter idiot. It's, a bumbling fool is quite nice, a likeable fool, rather than this guy's clueless. And I know that I've got several friends and people who watch who are mechanics and engineers, and they watch what I do and they cringe and go, "You idiot, how are you doing this wrong?" And I'm learning. It's the whole point is to try and create an image that is approachable in that. But to make mistakes is part of it, and to show that stuff is important. But there's so much social media out there that is this perfect life that's shown, and people show you a very tiny glimpse. I mean, again, my life looks glamorous. I get to go away, drive trains, drive trucks, tractors, go on adventures. And people don't see the amount of time that you spend, like you with the podcast. People listen to the podcast and enjoy it. They don't realise the amount of time you spend planning it, recording, putting it all together. And it's the same with me. My week basically at the moment involves sitting at my computer, staring at the screen, going, "Oh my God, how do I muck up this particular shot? How do I fix this?" And that's what it is. It's hours of sitting and editing to show a very little snapshot into your life. So it's all an act, I guess. I think that's where we're going.
Well, I think people get from my social media presence that they think I'm really nice, but I'm horrible.
Oh
actually.
yeah, absolutely. Every time I've met you, it's been absolutely awful.
I only got you to come on this podcast because of those photos.
Well, yeah. Well, less said about that, the better.
Can we talk about general advice that you would give to someone thinking about buying a locomotive? I know we've touched on this throughout this episode, but can we break it down to a few key points? Say, Lawrie, I'm thinking about buying a locomotive. What advice would you give me?
Don't do it.
Based on your experience. Apart from don't do it. I've already made the commitment.
No, very much. It's been a headache, and particularly sorting out the wheels for me has been a massive headache, and something that I didn't appreciate at the time, and that admittedly we all should have taken a better look at it, but we got too excited at the time with getting it running and Sir William. So I think the first thing is to understand what it is you're actually doing, and have a really clear understanding of what you're trying to buy. Like, I knew originally that I wanted a locomotive, and I wanted something that would be appropriate for Mid-Suffolk, and then I managed to narrow that down to a 48, and I was looking for a 48. So you want to have a very clear idea of what it is. All kind of that initial "I want a locomotive" is probably not a good idea. You want to have some better idea. It won't work for everybody, but the most crucial thing, I think, for me, and the thing that's been the biggest help, and at this point I will do a massive shout out to the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway and to everyone who's helped me with it for the amount of time that they allowed it to be in their workshop, and to our previous workshop manager Paul, who, when it was started in there following a service, and coated the entirety of his workshop in carbon deposits. So it's so important to have that relationship going. I want to own a locomotive, but I'm not an active volunteer anywhere. I really would stress is a bad idea. The best thing you can do is, if you're thinking of you want to own something, get involved in perhaps your local society or a railway somewhere, and learn at least the bare minimums of how a railway society operates. They're going to be different no matter where you go, but you need to understand how these things work, and you need to be realistic. For instance, there's no point in getting a 48 and expecting it to turn up at the Severn Valley and start running a service train. You need to understand what it is, what it's actually going to do, and very much whether it's going to be a business. I had tangent time. I had this discussion with a member of my family when I was discussing it. She said, "So how do you make money out of your locomotive?" And I was like, "Well, I don't." So, but why do you have the locomotive? Like, talk me through your business plan for it. Well, I can make videos on YouTube for it, and people really like it. So there's a bit of money generated there, but it's not why I got it. It's not a business plan locomotive. I bought it because I wanted one, and it was a long-held ambition for me to own my locomotive. Yeah, but where's the money going to come from? So I don't know. I'm going to sort it out. It's just my priority. So this went round in circles for about 10 minutes of the business model, how I was going to make it work. And eventually I went, look, it's like the dog. It doesn't actually contribute anything towards the household, but you quite like having your dog around. And if something goes wrong with the dog, you'll probably run him to the vet and pay however much money to sort it out. I just like the locomotive a lot more than I like the dog. Which apparently was the wrong thing to say, but there we go.
Your big metal dog.
It is.
Okay, let's say that we found somewhere to put it. How do you go about shopping around for a loco? I mean, you knew you wanted a 48, and you mentioned traction ads, which I love because it reminds me of the old internet when I look at it.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It hasn't updated.
It's like the old Fabricland website was the same. It's
so
just like,
good.
it's all like Times New Roman font and everything's brilliant. But how do you shop around for something like that?
Well, I think the big thing is that if you're actually looking for a locomotive and you're looking online for it, you might be doing the wrong thing. The best way to find a locomotive is that you're involved in a society. Because if you're really involved in a society and you're part of the inner workings of that, you hear things, you know things that are going on the railway. Most locomotive sales go on without being advertised. It's somebody comes along, like me. I was just in the right place at the right time. And the most important thing is the tact. I know somebody who recently was looking to buy a locomotive and sent an email to the railway going, oh, I want to buy this. And the railway just went, well, no, it's not for sale. And tact is really important. How I went about it was I didn't mention anything about buying it. I was just genuinely at the time trying to update the list and hope that maybe someone would offer one, or I'd find one that needed a home. And I happened to be in the right place at the right time to make that happen.
Well, thinking about that exchange as well, you opened the conversation with saying, I'm trying to update the list on this because I'm an enthusiast. You ended up getting it for the price that you wanted because you're an enthusiast. It's like that whole link.
And I think if I'd sent the email off going, I want to buy a 48, do you want to sell it? I imagine that the response would just been, it's not for sale. And so your tact's really important, and it's important, as I said, to be part of the community because you know what's going on. And also you hear things. If you're part of the community, you'll hear stuff that goes on that go, oh, such and such of sale. Wouldn't go near it because actually, despite what they say, it doesn't go into reverse. Or
full of asbestos, frames are bent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yada, yada, yada.
Or it's dodgy this, dodgy repair that. And you hear these things and you know, and it protects you. And also, just for the sake of, when I went and saw it, I took the Loco Super with me. I took 2 other members of the diesel team at the railway with me to go look at it. So I knew that my lacking knowledge would be made up by these guys. And also, to a degree, if I bought it and it was a terrible mistake, I had other people to blame. Because, but
they let me do it.
Yeah, exactly. But you're taking other people's advice on board with, and they went, yeah, this is a great thing to buy, let's go for it. And it gives you that sense of confidence with it. And also, it gives you an extra sense of reassurance that it is a community. And also, like the 3 that went with me, we're all good friends outside the railway now because we met through the railway. And I have been and frequently do go for drinks with them. You know, we go out and socialise. And to the others, you know, that frequently phone up and have a chat or say, I've broken this and I don't understand how to fix it. Please help. But the excitement of doing it, like, it would have been exciting anyway, don't get me wrong, but the excitement of doing it with your friends, with people that you really enjoy the company, like that car drive home was amazing because of we were all excited. We'd just gone together and bought a locomotive. We were over the moon by this concept that something appropriate, and that made it better. And it meant that because I had people on my side when it went to the railway, that things were happened, like to move stuff out of the workshop so it could be painted, that things could move around, that people were receptive to it because I'd gone the right channels and I had people on my side to start off with. Like I said, with us and Mid-Suffolk, we have 1 other locomotive that is privately owned, diesel-wise, on site. And that, again, is because the gentleman is a long-standing part of the railway. If you bought yourself a locomotive, and say you've put together a brand new Mid-Suffolk tank engine,
yes,
the railway would not necessarily go, oh, yes, definitely bring it here, because you're not part of that. So that's the most important part of advice I think I can give, is to before you do it, make sure you're part of that community, that you're ingrained in it and people know who you are and that you're actually a benefit to that society. You know, they know you turn up, you help out, that you're useful. And particularly if you show that you're willing to get involved and that you're practical and stuff, it gives you a better sense of, oh, well, we know that so-and-so is good because he turns up and he helps with this. So he's helped volunteer to do a washout, to do this, to help with this. He is a presence, and that will help you so much with sorting something like that. And even if you're not a volunteer, at least being there before and being around and talking to people. I think at the end of the day, you want to, if you're going to have a locomotive, something, you need to be actively involved in it. You can't have one.
How do you keep a locomotive? So buying it is one thing, finding a home for it, but then looking at your time breakdown of, how much time you've actually spent maintaining the loco that already runs there. How much of your time do you think that takes up?
Well, that's a difficult question, because that depends a lot on what contract you've actually got with the railway. With mine, the railway looks after the day-to-day running, the servicing, the fuelling, and minor work on it. So for me, I didn't really do anything. I painted it and occasionally turned up and looked at it. It had a flat battery, so I put a new battery on it and installed a solar panel. Yeah, that's about it, really, because that's the relationship I had with the railway. They took care of the day-to-day running with it, and then obviously when it was stopped because the wheel was set, that became my problem to deal with. So, yeah, the wonderful thing about a railway is that there's very limited places where it can actually go, particularly somewhere like Mid-Suffolk. You're pretty sure that 99.9% certain that it will still be on that quarter of a mile somewhere. No, it will be there.
Somewhere.
But, I mean, it's the worrying thing when it was moved out of service, it was put down to the end of the line, and you turned up one day and it's like, where is the 48?
Yeah. Where's it been parked?
Because, again, that's the big thing, and the most important thing to understand is, despite it being your locomotive, other people make decisions about what's happening to it, where it is, what it's going to be used for, and you don't necessarily get a say in that. And that's what it is. It's not like having a classic vehicle. And frankly, unless you really, really want a locomotive like I did, buy yourself a classic car. Because it's a far more rewarding, as an owner of classic vehicles, owning a tractor or a car is a far more rewarding experience, because I can rock up to my storage most of whenever I want to, within limitations, muck around with it, and then take it out on the road and go where I please, when I please. If I want to take it home, I can do that. If I want to take it to a show, I can do that. If I want to take it to another event, I can do that. If I want to take the tractor out and drive around causing chaos on the road, I can also do that. A locomotive, I have had days where I've had a play with a 48, but I do need to go to the railway and say, look, is it all right if I do X? I want to try to do Y. I want to see how many wagons it will push up the rank. Kind of those things. The answer from the railway was 1. So understanding that relationship of what you can do with it. And if you want to have the satisfaction of owning a locomotive, but you don't want to be that hands-on, then I really recommend becoming a part of a group, because there's some amazing locomotives out there that have amazing groups, and the social side and the community aspect of them is fantastic. Lots of them offer the ability to actually, be on it, have a ride on, learn to drive it, or just special days where it's in service and you as part of the community can go along. And so I would recommend doing that, because you can't own it and not be involved with it. And that's the most important thing with it. And of course, just be prepared that it is going to bite you in the backside. It's not going to be a smooth ride. It will go wrong. It will be a monumental headache with stuff. I should have. It's my fault and the others' fault for we didn't inspect the wheel set correctly. We were overjoyed. It aesthetically good condition, so William said it was good. It did start, it drove up and down, it didn't fall off the rails.
But do you think you wouldn't have bought it if you'd
God, no, I'd have bought it anyway, because...
Well, there we go.
It would, but if I...
Maybe you just would have been better mentally prepared for it.
I would have been prepared for it and started making a plan for what on earth I was going to do about it. I don't think I would have ever said no. However, I suppose if our local super who looked at it at the time had looked at the wheels, we might not have accepted it to Mid-Suffolk. So, yeah, swings and roundabouts. If you're looking for a locomotive, have an idea of vaguely what you're looking for. Like, I'm looking for... The 48, with the best will in the world, is a 1-to-1 scale model. It is a toy. I mean, I shouldn't say it's a toy, because it's a locomotive, and we should never, dismiss that the railway is a dangerous place, and it is, a dangerous piece of plant.
It's a toy that can kill you.
Yeah, precisely, it is.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't... I hate the term playing railways, and I use it a lot, but we should never say, oh, I'm playing trains, because we're not. We're operating a railway, and as soon as you forget that what we do is very dangerous and has a lot of implications for stuff going wrong, then that's when accidents happen. So I shouldn't say that for it, but it is. It's effectively a model. It's a lovely model, but so you need to know what you're actually looking for. So if you're looking for a locomotive that's actually going to earn its keep, or a locomotive that's actually going to do X or Y, or if it's a bit of a novelty, but it's a useful. Like my one has found at Mid-Suffolk, it's got a use. It's a useful shunter. It's got its use there, and that's good. Anywhere else, it would just be a novelty. So you need to know what it is you're looking for and what role you want that locomotive to fulfill. And a lot of the time, it's better not to look and just to let people know that you're looking for something and talk to people. And eventually, you'll just talk to the right person. And I know it's a terrible thing, but bearing in mind from being turned down on The Gower Princess to getting mine was the gap of 3 or 4 years. Of kind of sitting and waiting, biding your time. And I, if you're looking for one, I know that's a terrible thing to say. It's a bit like love, isn't it? They say don't go looking for love; it will find you. And that's a bit like that with me and Sir William. It's like,
and Lawrie found love with a Ruston diesel.
I love it. I love it so much. I did a video a while back. I took the fire engine to the railway and had the two of them sat side by side. I'm just like, these are my two big loves in life. They're together.
My babies.
Yeah, they are, and that says a lot about my personality, doesn't it? Really.
Long term, what do you envisage the Loco's future in your ownership being?
Working. That's the that's the long term. I want it to work, and as my my reputation grows. That sounds horrendous.
Online presence.
As more people kind of know who I am, I'd like it to go places. My big long-term dream with it is I'd love to take it to like the Severn Valley or the North Yorkshire Moors and do a line run. Because firstly, I think it'd be an amazing video, and secondly, I just think it'd be. Can you imagine the sight on water?
That'd be a hell of a live stream, wouldn't it? There's a 24-hour live stream of Lawrie driving the NYMR.
Can you imagine just you're at Water Arch and you just see. Oh, there's a diesel coming. I'm sure I can hear a diesel coming.
Still coming. Yeah.
Just this little thing rumbles across. I'd love to take it places. I've talked to a couple of railways about it going as being a special guest at galas. Because at that stage, I'm a special guest. I'm at Talaclin later this year as a inverted commas special guest, which shameless self promotion. That's amazingly exciting for me. We did a video of tangent alert, ladies and gentlemen, tangent alert. We did a video for our 50k special where we went to Clacton-on-Sea, which isn't that far away from where I live, and we put the drone up and filmed it because the population is just over 50,000. We flew this drone, and me and my colleague Matt were looking at it. And wow, that's a lot of houses, because it doesn't. I don't think I'm anything special. I'm amazed that people watch the videos, and I'm amazed that people will listen to this and go, oh yeah, I know him. And I went to the Worley. I went to Worley, and I had little cards that were Lawrie smiles upon you, and I bought 150 of them with me, and we gave out one to everyone who came up and said hello. And I had 5 left. Yes, one of them.
I've just held up mine to the screen if you're listening in.
And I had 5 left at the end of it, and sat there going, "This is I genuinely cannot comprehend it." And the fact that people enjoy the content and enjoy me and consider me something that's worth having to an event, or would like to have my locomotive come to an event because it's attached to me and understand the publicity, it blows my mind. Occasionally I try and comprehend what's going on, and I just cannot. I'm just so excited by the fact that people enjoy the content. I get to do this, and potentially it's going to become something I can do full time as a proper job. And there's so much wonderful heritage out there. There's so many amazing museums, amazing railways, communities, societies, and everything. And I'd love to be a volunteer at all of them. I'd like to do stuff at all of them, and I can't. There isn't enough time. But to go and be able to showcase them and represent them and show them to a wider world, I think that's the best thing that I can ever do, and show people that some of these amazing places exist. And that makes me happy, being able to showcase stuff and be part of it in some kind of small way.
Where should people go to find your adventures?
Go onto the YouTube and search for Laurie's Mechanical Marvels, or you can just search for LMM, and that will find us. That's
your SEO working there.
Oh yeah, it's a whole thing. There's also a website which eventually I will finish rebuilding, which has been a temporary website for about almost a year now. It's on my to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
It is the problem, trying to plan ahead. As you plan ahead with the podcast, find people who want to do it, come and put it together. It takes up an awful amount of time, and then having 31 projects that need to be put back together again. It does take up a lot.
I mean, we're no strangers to sort of in progress projects here.
Oh yes, exactly. Although I fear mine may be a little bit bigger.
Maybe. Just a bit.
It's. I think it's one of the things that started me on this was I looked at the price of model railway stuff, and realised that for the cost of buying a brand new model locomotive for my layout, if I bought 2 of those, or I could buy a car. Now, I'm a railway enthusiast through and through, and I'd much prefer locomotives, but an actual car.
Yeah, I mean, my daily driver costs less than a DCC fitted loco.
No, exactly. My Mini, that has been, I've done 11,000 miles in it now, and it's still doing strong. £200. I could buy a locomotive, and as good as that locomotive is, and whatever Hornby, Bachmann, KR, Rapido, whoever have turned out, that's a car. That's my big problem with model railway stuff at the moment.
Do you remember what I said about buying a burden, Lawrie?
No, not at all. Because I don't have.
Okay, yeah.
I have not listened to it. They are burdens. They are all burdens. So it's definitely. But I think a lot of the way I look at it is I have my storage, and yes, I have more projects than anybody can get on with, and yes, it's stupid, but they're all safe. They're not going anywhere, and if I don't do them, at least they're still here for somebody else. Because once something's gone, it's gone. Unless you're the A1 Trust, in which case you go, we're bucking the trend there, or any of the other new builds. But although say Tornado is an A1, it doesn't have the history of one that survived. It represents it very well.
Yeah, and I think we owe an awful lot to people who had the foresight to preserve even the mundane things.
The mundane stuff is some of the best stuff to look after. A lot of classic cars that are today, the owners remember them from when they were young. Either their parents had one or it was their first car. And the way that society works today with a lot of people who have cars on finance, you have a new car every 3 years. And I think that the next generation will grow up without that strong tie to a particular vehicle because they won't have that particular vehicle. And so sometimes the mundane stuff is amazing because you hear people go, we had one of those when we were growing up. I do apologise, dear listener, for the least train-related train podcast.
Just cut it all out.
Just cut. Hard editors. It'll be a 5-minute talk about the railways.
Laurie's going to stop mid-sentence and then come back.
It's been good. I'm looking forward to seeing how long the actual runtime of this podcast is. We do one on our channel for our Patreons. And the guy who edited it for me, he's like, I cut 1 hour and 15 minutes of your ramble out of the last podcast.
I'm sure it'll be fine. Lawrie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and telling us about your railway adventure.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a real honour to come on.
Brilliant. See you soon.
See you later. Goodbye, everyone.